In 2007, a parcel of undeveloped land located in the western foothills of the Diablo Range was purchased from Harry Marks by Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority to protect it from development. This land had two ranches, 574-acre Doan Ranch and 128-acre Nielsen Ranch. Open Space Authority expanded the preserve by purchasing another 120 acres held by Bank of Santa Barbara. The preserve was named Diablo Foothills, and it has rolling green hills studded with coast live oak trees, and its two ponds and stream are part of the primary watershed for the Pajaro River and Coyote Creek. The preserve stream and two ponds provide habitat for the threatened California red-legged frog and federally endangered California tiger salamander. The California red-legged frog is up to 5 inches long and is the largest native frog in the western United States. It is reddish in color on the underside of its legs and belly. It's found in ponds, pools and streams, and wet meadows. Hundreds of years ago, these frogs flourished from northern to Baja California. Their problems started in the 1800s with the boom in commercial demand for frogs' legs. In more recent years, human development has destroyed much of their habitat. Further distress was caused by introduction of the non-native American bullfrogs and fish that prey on their tadpoles into their habitat. The California red-legged frog is now limited mostly to coastal watersheds from Marin south to San Luis Obispo County. Male California red-legged frogs communicate with females using a series of short, soft grunts called advertisement calls. They will grunt several times, then end the call with a growl. Males usually make the call in or near bodies of water near areas that are attractive to a female as a good place to lay her eggs. Male calls are also used to establish their territory and repel rival males. Another water-loving amphibian is the endangered California tiger salamander. It is a stocky, 8-inch-long salamander with a broad, rounded snout and wide mouth outlined in yellow so it looks like it's smiling. Its small black eyes bulge. It got its common name from its black-colored body that has bright white or yellow bars across it. While it spends most of its time on land, it lives near ponds because they provide easy access to algae, mosquito larvae, tadpoles, and insects that these salamanders like to eat. Also, they breed in ponds. Females can lay as many as 1,300 eggs that are attached to vegetation. Eggs hatch and the larvae live in the pond until they mature into juveniles. In late spring, the juveniles find an underground home, typically taking over a ground squirrel burrow. They have been negatively impacted by urban development and farming, which limit their habitat. Squirrel control programs that reduce the number of burrows they can live in, non-native salamanders that compete for resources, and the American bullfrogs that eat their larvae. At the entrance to the preserve, we see evidence of the Cruise Fire, a wildfire that started on July 5, 2020, and burned more than 5,500 acres before it was extinguished 8 days later. The fire threatens 30 structures, farm, and ranch lands. The fire singed and burned many trees in the preserve, which you can see from their black trunks. It also burned down a small structure near the gates of the preserve and melted its glass windows. You may ask, do wildfires have a negative impact on wildlife? With the exception of our more recent, faster-moving and higher-intensity fires resulting from human fire suppression, the answer is no. The overall impact of a naturally occurring fire or prescribed burn on wildlife populations is minimal. Most wildlife responds and even adapts to fire, and many species benefit from fire either directly or indirectly. Animals can walk or run, fly, and even retreat to wet areas or burrows to escape from fires. Elk, Deer and bobcats return to burned areas minutes after the fire has passed to forage and hunt. Bears and raccoons scout along active flame fronts, searching for snakes and other small animals. Raptors fly in circles overhead, looking for rodents exposed on the ground or insects caught in smoke. Some species of wasps, wood-bearing beetles, and flies are attracted to chemical compounds in smoke and look for trees damaged by the fire to eat or lay their eggs. Some plant seeds require fire to sprout when other plants flower prolifically after a fire. Also, fire removes dead and diseased plants, allowing more sunlight to reach seedlings. On the ground, by some burned tree branches, we find gray-brown colored particulate matter. When the crew's fire burned branches, leaves, and other parts of these trees, it produced ash that fell onto the ground and became part of the soil. Ash is organic matter containing essential plant nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and magnesium, as well as sulfur, and acts like a fertilizer. There are a couple of prolific native wildflowers growing from this ash-rich soil. One of these is called ethereal spear and has a striking purple flower with 6 long petals and slender grass-like leaves. The plant's nickname is Indian potato because they form bulb-like corms underground, an adaptation for the long, dry periods in much of California. Burrowing and digging animals eat the corms because they're an excellent source of nutrition. Among the ash, we find 3 bright yellow tulip-shaped flowers with sparse yellow hairs and red-brown streaks near the center of the petals. Equally bright yellow stamens protrude from the center of the flower. These are yellow Mariposa lilies, and they are endemic to California. The bulbs of these wildflowers were prepared and eaten like potatoes by Native Americans. Also at the entrance to the preserve, we find a pair of red-tailed hawks, and their nest was built high up in a tree. They are calling and soaring around the tree to warn Mike and I to stay away from their nest. Red-tailed hawks usually mate for life. Their nest is placed high in a tree and is made of sticks lined with soft material such as lichen. They use the nest year after year. The female hawk lays 1 to 5 eggs, which are white with brown spots. Mom and Dad take turns sitting on the eggs, keeping them warm and safe. Male and female red-tailed hawks look very similar, though females are larger. Red-tailed hawks hunt from perches and from the air. As they circle and soar, they can spot their prey from 100 feet up in the air. They eat a variety of small mammals such as voles, mice, wood rats, jackrabbits, and ground squirrels, in addition to other birds. Even though the red-tailed hawk is one of the largest birds in North America, even the biggest hawks weigh only about 3 pounds. Amazingly, they are able to capture prey that weigh up to 5 pounds. The dirt trail we are following is as wide as a fire road. Along the trail, we find evidence of birds and mammals from the tracks they left. The 3 main characteristics that help to identify the wildlife that made the tracks are its dimensions, number of toes, and whether the tracks show nail prints. For example, cows, mountain lions, and wild boars have larger tracks than coyote, squirrels, and skunks. Examples of animals with 2 toes are cows, deer, and pigs. Cats, such as bobcats and mountain lions, dogs, such as coyotes and foxes, and birds all have 4 toes. Interestingly, even though turkeys have 4 toes, the tracks they make only show 3 toes. Badgers, skunks, and opossums have 5 toes. To make things even more complicated, for rodents like squirrels, their front paws have 4 toes and their rear paws have 5. Canine and feline tracks are harder to distinguish because they all have 4 toes, and some species are very similar in size. One way to distinguish between dogs and cats is that a dog's claws are often extended when they walk, so you can see the claws in the track, whereas cat tracks typically do not have claws. If there is scat nearby, this is an additional piece of evidence that helps in identification. For instance, if the scat contains hair, you know the animal is a carnivore, and if it contains berries and similar plant material, it may be an herbivore. Also, the size of the scat will help identify the animal. The first tracks we encounter is a snake track leading to a squirrel burrow, which may mean the snake was looking for a squirrel breakfast this morning. A little further along the trail, Mike moves me out of the way, and we both hear the rattling of a northern Pacific rattlesnake, who is coiled up on the side of the trail, sticking out its purple forked tongue, retracting it, and repeating these motions all over again. Its tail is vibrating rapidly to create the warning rattle. Fun fact, for young snakes, a new rattle segment is added every time its skin is shed, which can be more than once per year. This 3-foot-long adult snake has a triangular head and olive-brown scales with pale yellow blotches, which allows it to blend in with the low-lying, dry, tan-colored grasses. Northern Pacific rattlesnakes are considered dangerously venomous. They will avoid striking and biting humans because it wastes their limited supply of venom, which they need to kill and digest their food. While northern Pacific rattlesnakes prefer to eat California ground squirrels, there has been an evolutionary battle between these snakes and their prey. Over time, adult ground squirrels adapted by gaining resistance to the rattlesnake venom, so the snakes adapted by increasing the potency of their venom or biting their prey twice. Another adaptation by these snakes was to begin targeting juvenile squirrels who are still sensitive to their venom. To understand how the young squirrels fought back, I need you to know that rattlesnakes have holes on their faces called pit organs that detect infrared radiation from up to 3 feet away and can generate accurate thermal images of their prey. Juvenile ground squirrels change their behavior when confronted by rattlesnakes by throwing dirt at the snake's pit organs and shaking their tail high above their body to make themselves seem larger, like an adult squirrel. And the coevolution continues. Next, we find tracks from wildlife that has 3 long toes in the front and 1 in the back. This must be a bird. Walking a little further, we see signs of turkey mating tracks. Male wild turkeys display for females by puffing out their feathers, spreading out their tails, and dragging their wings. This behavior is most commonly referred to as strutting. These tracks were made by a male turkey dragging his wingtips. We find more evidence of turkeys in the area with some wild turkey scat, which is identifiable by its size and the fact that it has white paste around it. The white in bird droppings is predominantly uric acid excreted by the kidneys. Unlike mammals, birds do not excrete the products of protein breakdown as soluble urea, but as uric acid. This is only marginally soluble, so it's seen as a white paste in their feces. Other evidence we find nearby is a feather.
From the color and the sheen, the reflection off of this tip here, it kind of looks like it's a turkey feather, especially since we have turkeys in the area. But definitely one of those semi-plumes. Semi-plumes have down either half or 3/4 of the way, and then they have feather barbules out at the end. So this is a semi-plume from a wild turkey.
On our way to the first pond, we see a beautiful bird sitting on a fallen log. It is plump, short-legged, and short-necked, with a black curved crest drooping above and over its forehead. His black face has a white stripe on his forehead and around his face with a blue-gray breast and scaled black and white belly. This is a male California quail, and he turns himself around to show off his back and then quickly walks along the log, bopping his head as he moves. On a small dirt hill, we find a 3-inch long lizard basking in the sun. It is covered with spiny, light brown scales with darker brown blotches and has a tan underside so it blends in perfectly with the dirt. As it breathes deeply, it appears to be looking at me to gauge whether to run away or keep still. This lizard has 4 toes on each claw and a tail that is as long as its body. This is a northwestern fence lizard, a majority of which live in California. Mature male lizards have large, bright blue patches surrounded by black on their belly. In California, these lizards are the preferred host for western black-legged ticks, or deer ticks, which are the primary carriers of the bacteria that cause Lyme disease. Specifically, up to 90% of these ticks feed on western fence lizards. The tick population even decreases without them. Interestingly, researchers at UC Berkeley discovered a protein in the western fence lizard's blood that acts like an antibiotic and kills the bacterium that causes Lyme disease. Essentially, this sanitizes ticks so if they go to another host, the host is spared the disease. This may explain why Lyme disease is less common in California than it is in some areas, like the northeastern states, where it's an epidemic. Mike and I hear the calls of a northern harrier and look up into the sky. They are slender, medium-sized raptors with long, fairly broad wings and a long, rounded tail. They have a flat, owl-like face and a small, sharply hooked bill. This bird is brown above, with a white rump patch and whitish below, and a black banded tail. Northern harriers live in open grasslands, and this bird soars above the hills, then makes a landing in the valley of a grass-covered hill. Since they nest on the ground, it is likely returning to its nest. Unlike other hawks, they rely heavily on their sense of hearing to capture prey. In the breeding season, they eat small mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and birds. Each male courts females and advertises his territory by performing sky-dancing displays with roller coaster-like flights up to 1,000 feet off the ground, sometimes covering more than half a mile. Although they don't protect their large territories, both males and females vigorously defend the nest itself, and it's obviously harder to defend a nest that is laying on the ground. Hiding in the dry grasses and dirt, we spot a 4-foot-long Pacific gopher snake with a light brown body and a regular pattern of red-brown, round spots outlined in black along its entire back. Adults can grow up to 9 feet long. They are most active in the daytime when it's warmer. They are good at burrowing, climbing, and swimming, which enables them to catch small mammals for food and kill their prey by suffocating them in body coils or by pressing the animal against the walls of their underground burrows. These snakes are non-venomous, but when agitated, they may mimic the defense posture of venomous rattlesnakes by flattening out their heads, coiling, and shaking their tails. When this is done in dry vegetation, it closely resembles the sound of a rattlesnake. They also produce a guttural hiss when threatened and may excrete a foul-smelling musk. Gopher snakes have a specifically developed epiglottis which increases the sound of their hiss when air is forced through the glottis. We look closely at its face and notice its round, dark brown pupils surrounded by a reddish-brown iris. They got their common name from the fact that they like to live in gopher burrows. Gopher snakes are beneficial in that they help control rodent populations, but because of their tendency to mimic rattlesnakes, people often mistakenly kill them. We reach the first pond and notice lots of new plantings protected by wire cages. This is because the preserve is a site for restoration by Caltrans. Caltrans committed to mitigate for the loss of riparian habitat when they widened Highway 152 by restoring 13 acres of stream and wetlands along the creek and surrounding the preserve's 2 ponds. This included planting of more than 27 native species of plants, such as sycamore, oak trees, local willow trees, and purple needlegrass. We spot a yellow-faced bee that is pollinating a bird's foot trefoil, and it blends in perfectly. Yellow-faced bees resemble tiny black wasps, but with bright yellow markings on their face, legs, and thorax. They are slender and can easily squeeze deep into flowers to collect pollen and nectar. Unlike most other bees, they do not possess scopa, which are external appendages such as dense masses of hair on the hind legs used to carry pollen. Instead, yellow-faced bees carry pollen in a special compartment of their stomach called a crop or honey stomach, and then regurgitate it at their nest. This family includes 130 species in America. 7 species of Hawaiian yellow-faced bee were decimated by invasive species and habitat loss and are now federally protected. The reason I said they blend in perfectly is because bird's foot trefoil have bright yellow pea-like flowers that camouflage the bees. It is an invasive species that forms dense mats that choke and shade out other vegetation. At the second pond, there is more to see and hear. We hear and see red-winged blackbirds flying between the tule stems. We also see and hear a baby American coot being fed by their mom. On the tip of a strand of tule, we see a bright red cardinal meadowhawk dragonfly. Did you know that dragonflies are the fastest flying insect? They are known to travel at a speed of 35 miles an hour. Hawk moths come in second at almost 34 miles an hour. There are brown leaves on the water's surface, and a tiny wolf spider is crawling on the leaves, stopping to eat with its fangs, then crawling more. It is a tan spider with dark brown stripes from head to hind. Crawling on the mud and pond plants, we find a butterfly whose wing underside is chalky white with small black spots, dashes, and other markings. This is likely a male echo azure butterfly because males like to visit mud and scat. Females lay their eggs on flower buds of wild lilacs, California buckeye, blackberries, and other flowering plants. Their larvae feed on buds and opening flowers and have a symbiotic relationship with ants. Specifically, the larvae secretes honeydew from their abdomen that the ants like to eat, and the ants protect the larvae from predators such as wasps and flies. Mike picks up a brown bug with 6 legs, about the size of a ladybug, and it walks down his pinky finger. On the way back to the park entrance, we hear a bustling of noise from the sky and oak trees. These are the calls of yellow-billed magpies, and they live only in California. They are large, heavy-set songbirds with a large head, long tail, and bright yellow stout bill. Their shoulders and belly are bright white against their black body. I see one land in an oak tree and find it perched on a branch. They like to nest about 40 feet up in trees. They are omnivores and prefer to forage on the ground. I find another one walking slowly in the grass looking for grain, insects, and rodents. Even though these birds can adapt to live in suburban areas, they have been hit hard by habitat loss due to human development, rodenticides that kill their food source, and West Nile virus, leading to a 76% decline in their population from 1968 to 2015. Magpies are monogamous and form long-term pairs. They are social birds that travel in small flocks in the summer and larger flocks in non-breeding seasons. These two are resting on a fence. There is some indication of them being friendly with other animals, as they have been seen pecking insects off the backs of mule deer. Before we reach the park gate, we notice a track in scat. The scat is dark brown and contains lighter colored fur from ground squirrels or rabbits. It is almost 1 inch in diameter. Both are characteristics that are indicative of coyote, since they are omnivores. In addition, nearby are coyote tracks.
I don't see any claws, but the substrate is very shallow, so its claws may not have extended far enough. That's the coyote track, right side. I'm pretty sure this is kind of leading toe here, but usually the toes are even at the front, so a little bit different. But the track is narrower and longer, which is a typical canine track, rather than a round track you see for feline.
We look down at the dirt in front of us because we see hundreds of little black worker ants running across the trail in a foraging column or line, carrying dried plant flowers that contain seeds, which they are carrying back to their nest to be stored. These harvester ants are endemic to California. Ants secrete volatile substances from their poison glands to signal to the other ants to follow their trail. This guides the worker ants to the food location and back to the nest. As we come to the end of the trail, we feel grateful for this colorful journey through the rolling hills, oak grasslands, ponds, and streams of Diablo Foothills Preserve, where we discovered many wildflowers and varied wildlife such as snakes, lizards, birds, and insects.